Hello, and welcome back to Baby Elias's stories. We now return to The Fifth Elephant by Terry Pratchett. Part 14. A solitary light burned in the window. Captain Collins sat by the candle, staring at nothing. Regulations called for the watch house to be manned at all hours, and that's what he was doing. The floorboards in the room below creaked into a new position. For many months now they'd been walked on around the clock, because the main office never had fewer than half a dozen people in it. Chairs, too, accustomed to being warmed continuously by a relay of bottoms, groaned gently as they cooled. There was only one thought buzzing around Fred Collins' head. Mr. Vimes is going to go completely bizarre. He's going to go totally librarian poo. His hand went down to the desk and came back automatically, while he looked straight ahead. There was the crunch of a sugar lump being eaten. Snow was falling again. The watchman that Vimes had named Colonesque was leaning in his box by the hub-ward gate of Bionk. He'd perfected the art, and it was an art form, of going to sleep upright with his eyes open. It was one of the things you learned on endless nights. A female voice by his ear said, "Now, there are two ways this could go." His position didn't change. He continued to stare straight ahead. "You haven't seen anything. That's the truth, isn't it? Just nod." He nodded once. "Good man. You didn't hear me arrive, did you? Just nod." Nod. "So you won't know when I've gone. Am I right? Just nod." Nod. "You don't want any trouble. Just nod." Nod. "They don't pay you enough for this. Just nod." This time the nod was quite emphatic. "You get more than your fair share of night watches as it is, anyway." Colonesque's jaw dropped. Whoever was standing in the shadows was clearly reading his mind. "Good man, you just stand here then, and make sure no one steals the gate." Colonesque took care to continue to stare straight ahead. He heard the thud and creak of the gate being opened and closed. It occurred to him that the speaker had not in fact mentioned what the other way was, and he was quite relieved about that. "What was the other way?" said Vimes, as they hurried through the snow. "We'd go and look for another way in," said Angua. There were few people on the streets, which were whitening with the new snow again, except where wisps of steam escaped from the occasional grating. In Uberwald, it seemed, sunset made its own curfew. This was just as well, because Gavin was growling continuously under his breath. Carrot came back from the next corner. "There's dwarves on guard all round the embassy," he said. "They don't look open to negotiation, sir." Vimes looked down. They were standing on a grating. Captain Tantony of the Bionk Watch was not happy with his duty. He'd been at the opera last night, and later on he'd thought he saw things happening in a way which the burgomaster had instructed him hadn't happened. Of course, the thing to do was obey orders. You were safe if you obeyed orders. Everyone in the watch knew that. But these didn't feel like safe orders. He'd heard they did things differently in Ankh-Morpork. My Lord Vimes would arrest anyone, they said. Tantony had set up a desk in the embassy's hall so that he could keep an eye on the main doors. He'd taken some pains to position his men around the inside of the building. He didn't trust the dwarves on guard outside. They'd said they'd got orders to kill Vimes on sight, and that didn't make any sense. There had to be some sort of a trial, didn't there? There was a faint noise from upstairs. He stood up carefully and reached for his crossbow. Corporal Svelte? There was another little sound. Tantony went to the bottom of the stairs. Vimes appeared at the top of them. There was blood on his shirt, encrusted on the side of his face. To the captain's horror, he began to walk down the steps. I will shoot you! That's the order, is it? Said Vimes. Yes! Stop there! But if I'm going to be shot anyway, there's no point in stopping, is there? Said Vimes. I don't think you're the kind to do that, Captain. You've got a brain. Vimes steadied himself on the banister rail. Shouldn't you have called for the rest of the guards by now, by the way? I tell you to stop! You know who I am. If you're going to fire that damn thing, do it now. But first, I suggest it would be a really good career move to tug the bell pull over there. What's the worst that would happen? You've still got the bow pointed at me. There's something you really ought to know. Tantony gave him a suspicious look, but took a few steps sideways and tugged the rope. Eagle stepped out from behind a pillar. Yes, Martha? Tell this young man where he is, will you? He's in Ankh-Morpork, Martha, said Igor calmly. See? Said Vimes. And don't glare at Igor like that. I missed it when he welcomed me here, but it's true. This is an embassy, my son. He went on, walking forwards again, and that means it's officially on the soil of the home country. Welcome to Ankh-Morpork. There's thousands of Uberwald people living in our city. You don't want to go starting a war, do you? But they said my orders. You are a criminal. The word is accused, Captain. We don't kill people in Ankh-Morpork just because they're accused. Well, not on purpose, and not because someone tells us to. Vimes took the crossbow out of Tantony's unresisting hands and fired it into the ceiling. Now send your men away, he said. I'm in Ankh-Morpork, said the captain. Even in his current state, Vimes thought he recognized the harmonics. That's right, he said, putting an arm around him. A city which, incidentally, always has a job in the watch for a young man of ability. Tantony's body stiffened. He pushed Vimes's arm away. You insult me, my lord. This is my country. Ah, Vimes was aware of Carrot and Angua watching from the landing. But I will not see it dishonored either, said the captain. This isn't right. I saw what happened last night. You swept up the king and your troll caught the chandelier. And then they said you tried to kill the king and you'd kill dwarves when you escaped. Are you in charge of the watch here? No, that's the job of the burgomaster. And who gives him his orders? Everyone, said Tantony bitterly. Vimes nodded. Been there, he thought. Been there, done that. Bought the doublet. Are you going to stop me taking my people out of here? How can you do that? The dwarves surround us. We're going to use diplomatic channels. Just show me where everyone is and we'll be off. If it's any help, I can hit you over the head and tie you up. That will not be required. The dwarf and the troll are in the cellar. Her ladyship is. I assume she's wherever the Baron took her. Vimes felt the little trickle of superheated ice down his spine. Took her? He said hoarsely. Well, yes. Tantony stepped back from Vimes's expression. She knew the Baroness, sir. She said they were old friends. She said they could sort it all out. And then Tantony's voice became a mumble, seared into silence by the look on Vimes's face. When Vimes spoke, it was in a monotone as threatening as a spear. You are standing there in your shiny breastplate and your silly helmet and your sword without a single notch in the blade and your stupid trousers, and you are telling me that you let my wife be taken away by werewolves? Tantony took a step backwards. It was the Baron. And you don't argue with barons, right? You don't argue with anyone. Do you know what? I'm ashamed. Ashamed to think that something like you is called a watchman. Now give me those keys. The man had gone red. You've obeyed any orders, said Vimes. Don't even think about disobeying that one. Carrot reached the bottom of the stairs and put a hand on Vimes's shoulder. Steady, Mr. Vimes. Tantony looked from one to the other and made a life decision. I hope you find your lady, my lord. He produced a bunch of keys and handed them over. I really do. Vimes, still fighting for breath, wordlessly passed the keys to Carrot. Let them out, he said. Are you going to the werewolves' castle? Tantony panted. Yes. You won't stand a chance, my lord. They do as they please. Then they've got to be stopped. You can't. The old one understood the rules, but Wolfgang, he doesn't obey anything. All the more reason to stop him then. Ah, detritus, the troll saluted. You've got your bow, I see. Treated you well, did they? They called me a fickle troll, said Detritus darkly. One of them kicked me in a rocks. Was it this one? No. But he is their captain, said Vimes, stepping away from Tantony. Sergeant, I order you, shoot him down. In one movement, the troll had the crossbow balanced on his shoulder and was sighting along the massive package of arrows. Tantony went pale. Well, go on, said Vimes. It was an order, Sergeant. Detritus lowered the bow. I ain't that fixer. I gave you an order. Then you can do with that order what Boulder der Lintel did with his bag of gravel, sir. With respect, of course. Vimes walked across and patted the shaking Tantony on his shoulder. Just making a point, he said. However, said Detritus, if you can find the man that kicked me in the rocks, I should be happy to give him a flick around the ear hole. I know which one it was. He's the one walking with the limp. Lady Sybil drank her wine carefully. It didn't taste very nice. In fact, Quite a lot of things weren't very nice. She wasn't a good cook. She'd never been taught proper cookery. At her school, it had always been assumed that other people would be doing the cooking, and that in any case, it would be for 50 people using at least 4 types of fork. Such dishes as she had mastered were dainty things on dollies. Such dishes as she had mastered were dainty things on doilies. Doily, a small napkin. Doily, a small, often decorative mat. Doily. But she cooked for Sam because she vaguely felt that a wife ought to, and besides, he was an eater who entirely matched her kitchen skills. He liked burnt sausages and fried eggs that went boing when you tried to stick a fork in them. If you gave him caviar, he'd want it in batter. He was an easy man to feed if you always kept some lard in the house. But the food here tasted as though it had been cooked by someone who had never even tried before. She'd seen the kitchens when Seraphine had given her the little tour, and they just about do for a cottage. The game larders, on the other hand, were the size of barns. She'd never seen so many dead things hanging up. It was just that she was certain that venison shouldn't be served boiled with potatoes that were crunchy. If they were potatoes, of course. Potatoes weren't usually grey. Even Sam, who liked the black lumpy bits you got in some mashed potatoes, would have commented. But Sybil had been brought up properly. If you can't find something nice to say about the food, find something else to be nice about. These are really very interesting plates, she said dutifully. Are you sure there's been no more news? She tried to avoid watching the Baron. He was ignoring Sybil and his wife, and was prodding the meat around his plate as if he'd forgotten what a knife and fork were for. Wolfgang and his friends are still out searching, said Seraphine. But this is terrible weather for a man to be on the run. He's not on the run, snapped Sybil. Sam is not guilty of anything. Of course. All the evidence is circumstantial. Of course, said the Baroness soothingly. Now, I suggest that as soon as they have the passes clear, you and the staff get back to safety. You and the staff get back to the safety of Ankh-Morpork before the real winter hits. We know the country, my dear. If your husband is alive, we can soon do something about it. I will not have him shamed like this. You saw him save the king. I'm sure he did, Sybil. I'm afraid I was talking to my husband at the time, but I don't disbelieve you for a minute. Is it true that he killed all those men in the Wilderness Pass? What? But they were bandits! At the other end of the table, the Baron had picked up a lump of meat and was trying to tear it apart with his teeth. Well, of course. Yes, of course. Sybil pinched the bridge of her nose. Most of her would not have considered Sam Vimes guilty of murder. Actual murder. Even on the evidence of 3 gods and a message written on the sky. But stories did get back to her in a roundabout way. Sam got wound up about things. Sometimes he unwound all at once. There'd been that bad business with that little girl and those men over at Dolly Sisters. And when Sam had broken into the men's lodging, he found one of them had stolen one of her shoes, and she'd heard Detritus say that if he hadn't been there, only Sam would have walked out of the room alive. She shook her head. "I really would like a bath," she said. There was a clatter from the other end of the table. "Dear, you will have to eat your dinner in the changing room," said the Baroness without looking round. She flashed Lady Sybil a brief brittle smile. "We do not, in fact, have such a device in the castle." A thought occurred to her. "We use the hot springs. So much more hygienic." "Out in the forest?" "Oh, it's quite close, and a quick run around in the snow really tones up the body." "I think perhaps I'll have a lie down instead," said Lady Sybil firmly. "But thank you, all the same." She made her way to the musty bedroom, fuming in a ladylike way. She couldn't bring herself to like Seraphine, and this was shocking. Because Lady Sybil even liked Nobby Nobs, and that took breeding. But the werewolf scraped across her nerves like a file. She remembered that she'd never liked her at school either. Among the other unwanted baggage that had been heaped on the young Sybil to hamper her progress through life was the injunction to be pleasant to people and say helpful things. People took this to mean that she didn't think. She hated the way Seraphine had talked about dwarves. She called them subhuman. Well, obviously most of them lived underground, but Sybil rather liked dwarves, and Seraphine spoke of trolls as if they were things. Sybil hadn't met many trolls, but the ones she knew seemed to spend their lives raising their children and looking for the next dollar, just like everyone else. Worst of all, Seraphine simply assumed that Sybil would naturally agree with her stupid opinions because she was a lady. Sybil Ramkin had not had an education in these things, moral philosophy not having featured much in a curriculum that was heavy on flower arranging. But she had a shrewd idea that in any possible debate, the right side was where Seraphine wasn't. She'd only ever written all those letters to her because it was what you did. You always wrote letters to old friends, even if you weren't very friendly with them. She sat on the bed and stared at the wall until the shouting started. And when the shouting started, she knew Sam was alive and well, because only Sam made people that angry. She heard the key click in the lock. Sybil rebelled. She was large and she was kind. She hadn't enjoyed school much. A society of girls is not a good one in which to be large and kind, because people are inclined to interpret that as stupid and, worse, deaf. Sybil looked out of the window. She was 2 floors up. There were bars across it, but they'd been disguised to keep something out. But they'd been designed to keep something out. From the inside, they could be lifted out of their slots. And there were musty but heavy sheets and blankets on the bed. None of this might have suggested very much to the average person, but life in a rather strict school for well-brought-up young ladies can give someone a real insight into the tricks of escapology. 5 minutes after the key had turned, there was only one bar in the window, and it was jerking and creaking in the stonework, suggesting that quite a heavy weight was on the sheets that had been neatly knotted around it. Torches streamed along the castle walls. The ghastly red and black flag snapped in the wind. Vimes looked over the side of the bridge. The water was a long way down, and pure white even before it reached the waterfall. Forward and back were the only possible directions here. He reviewed his troops. Unfortunately, this did not take long. Even a policeman could count up to 5. Then there was Gavin and his wolves who were lurking in the trees. And finally, very definitely finally, there was Gaspard, the Corporal Nobbs of the canine world, who attached himself to the group uninvited. What else was on his side? Well, the enemy preferred not to use weapons. This bonus evaporated somewhat when you remembered that they had, at will, some very nasty teeth and claws. He sighed and turned to Angua. I know this is your family, he said. I won't blame you if you hang back. We'll see, sir. Shall we? How are we going to get in, sir? Said Carrot. How would you go about it, Carrot? Well, I'd start by knocking, sir. Really? Sergeant Detritus, forward, please. Sir. Blow the bloody doors off. Yes, sir. Vimes turned back to Carrot as the troll gazed thoughtfully at the door and began making extra turns on his crossbow's winch, grunting as the springs fought back. Their fight was unsuccessful. This isn't Ankh-Morpork, see? Said Vimes. Detritus hoisted the bow onto his shoulders and took a step forward. There was a thunk. Vimes didn't see the bundle of arrows leave the bow. They were probably already fragments by the time they'd gone a few feet. Halfway towards the door, the expanding cloud of splinters exploded into flame from the air friction. What hit the doors was a fireball as angry and unstoppable as the 5th elephant, and traveling at an appreciable fraction of local light speed. My God, Detritus, muttered Vimes as the thunder died away. That's not a crossbow. That's a national emergency. A few bits of charred door crashed onto the cobbles. The wolves won't come in, Mr. Vimes, said Angua. Gavin will follow me, but they won't come, not even for him. Why not? Because they're wolves, sir. They don't feel at home in houses. The only sound was the squeak of Detritus winding up his bow again. The hell with it, said Vimes, drawing his sword, shing, and stepping forward. Lady Sybil untucked her dress from her underwear and stepped carefully across the little courtyard. She was somewhere around the rear of the castle, as far as she could make out. She flattened herself as best she could against the wall when she heard a sound, and tightened her grip on one of the iron bars that had formerly graced the window. A large wolf came around the corner, holding a bone in its mouth. It did not look as if it was expecting her, and it certainly wasn't expecting the iron bar. Oh, I'm terribly sorry, said Sybil automatically as it folded up onto the cobbles. There was an explosion on the other side of the castle. That sounded like Sam. Do you think they heard us, sir? Said Carrot. Captain, people in Ankh-Morpork probably heard us. So where are all the werewolves? Angua pushed forward. This way, she said. She led them up a flight of low steps and tried one of the doors to the keep. It swung back slowly. There were torches in the hall too. They'll leave us somewhere to run, she said. We always leave people somewhere to run. A pair of smaller doors at the far end of the hall were pushed open. No handles, Vimes noted. Paws can't use handles. Wolfgang stepped in. A couple of dozen werewolves escorted him, fanning out around the room and sitting down. Sprawling down, and then watching the intruders with keen interest. "Ah! Civilized!" said Wolfgang cheerfully. "You won the game! Would you like another go? When people have a second game, we give them a handicap. We bite one of their legs off. Good joke, eh?" "I think I prefer the Ankh-Morpork sense of humour," said Vimes. "Where's my wife, you bastard?" He could still hear the sound of detritus winding. That was the trouble with the big bow. It was only a quick fire weapon by geological standards. "And Delphine, look at what the dog dragged in," said Wolfgang, ignoring Vimes. He stepped forward. Vimes heard a growl begin in Angua's throat. A sound which would cause instant obedience in many of Ankh-Morpork's criminal population when they encountered it in a dark alley. There was a deeper rumble from Gavin. Wolfgang stopped. "You haven't got the brains for this, Wolfie," said Angua, "and you couldn't plot your way out of a wet paper bag. Where's Mother?" She looked around at the lolling werewolves. "Hello, Uncle Ulf, Aunt Hilda, Magwen, Nancy, Unity. The pack's all here then, except for Father, who I expect is off rolling in something. What a family." "I want these disgusting people out of here right away," said the Baroness, stepping into the hall. She glared at Detritus. "How dare you bring a troll into this house?" "Oh, okay, it's all wound up," said Detritus cheerfully, hoisting the humming bow onto his shoulder. "Where should I fire it, Mr. Vimes?" "Good grief, not in here. This is an enclosed building." "Only until I pull this trigger, sir." "How very civilized," said the Baroness. "How very Ankh-Morpork. You think you merely have to threaten and the lesser races back down, eh?" "Have you seen your gates lately?" said Vimes. "We're werewolves!" snapped the Baroness, and it was a snap, the words sharp and clipped as though they were barked. "Stupid toys like that don't frighten us. But it'll slow you down for a while. Now bring out Lady Sybil." "Lady Sybil is resting." "You are in no position to make demands, Mr. Vimes. We are not the criminals here." As Vimes's mouth dropped open, she went on. "The game is not against the law. It has been played for 1,000 years. And what else is it that you think we have done? Stolen the dwarf's pet rock? You know it wasn't stolen," said Vimes. "And I know you know nothing. You suspect everything. You have that kind of mind. Your son said, My son, unfortunately, has honed to perfection every muscle in his body except the ones for thinking with," said the Baroness. "In civilized Ankh-Morpork, I dare say you can barge into people's houses and stamp around, but here, in our barbaric backwater, the law requires something beyond mere assertion." "I can smell the fear," said Angua. "It's pouring off you, Mother." "Sam?" They looked up. Lady Sybil was standing at the top of some stone stairs leading to a lower floor, looking bewildered and angry. She was holding an iron bar with a bend in it. "Sybil! She told me you were on the run and they were all trying to save you. But that wasn't right, was it?" It's a terrible thing to admit to yourself, but when the shoulder blades are pressed firmly against the brickwork, then any weapon will do. And right now Vimes saw Sybil loaded and ready to fire. She got on with people. Practically, from the moment she'd been able to talk, she'd been taught how to listen. And when Sybil listened to people, she made them feel good about themselves. It was probably something to do with being a big girl. She tried to make herself seem small, and by default that made those around her feel bigger. She got on with people almost as well as Carrot did. No wonder even the dwarves liked her. She had pages to herself in twerp's peerage, huge ancestral anchors biting into the past, and dwarves also respected someone who knew their great-great-great-grandfather's full name. And Sybil couldn't lie. You could see her redden when she tried it. Sybil was a rock. She made detritus look like a sponge. "We've been having a lovely run in the woods, dear," he said. "Now please come here, because I think we're going to see the king, and I'm going to tell him everything. I've worked it out at last." "The dwarves will kill you," said the Baroness. "I can probably outrun a dwarf," said Vimes. "And now we're leaving. Angua?" Angua hadn't moved. Her eyes were still fixed on her mother, and she was still growling. Vimes recognized the signs. You spotted them in the bars of Ankh-Morpork every Saturday night. Hackles rose, and people climbed up them, and then all that was needed was for someone to break a bottle, or blink. "We are leaving, Angua," he repeated. The other werewolves were standing up and stretching. Carrot reached out and took her arm. She turned, snarling. It was over in a fraction of a second, and in reality her head had hardly moved before she got a grip on herself. "Sir, this is the boy," said the Baroness, her voice slurring. "You betray your people for this!" Her ears were lengthening. Vimes was sure the muscles in her face were moving strangely too. "And what else has Ankh-Morpork taught you?" Angua shuddered. "Self-control," she muttered. "Let's go, Mr. Vimes." The werewolves closed in as they backed towards the steps. "Don't turn your back," said Angua levelly. "Don't run." "Don't need telling," said Vimes. He was watching Wolfgang, who was moving obliquely across the floor, his eyes fixed on the retreating party. They'll have to bunch up to follow us through the doorway, he thought. He glanced at Detritus. The giant crossbow was weaving back and forth as the troll tried to keep all the wolves in the field of fire. "Fire it," said Angua. "But they're your family," said Sybil. "They'll heal soon enough, believe me." "Detritus, don't shoot unless you have to," Vimes ordered as they headed towards the drawbridge. "He has to, now," said Angua. "Sooner or later, Wolfgang will leap and the others will take..." "There's something you ought to know, sir," said Sherry. "You really ought to know it, sir. It's really important." Vimes looked across the drawbridge. Figures massed in the dark. Torchlight glinted off armor and weaponry, blocking the way. "Well, things couldn't get any worse," he said. "Oh, they could if there were snakes on here with us," said Lady Sybil. Carrot turned at the sound of Vimes's snort of laughter. "Sir?" Oh, nothing, Captain. Keep your eyes on the bastards, will you? We can deal with the soldiers later.
Just say the word, sir,
said Detritus. You are trapped now, snarled the Baroness. Watchman, do your duty. A figure was walking across the bridge carrying a torch. Captain Tantony reached Vimes and glared at him. Stand aside, sir, he said. Stand aside, or by gods, ambassador or not, I'll arrest you. Their eyes met. Then Vimes looked away. Let's let him through, he said. The man's decided he's got a duty to do. Tantony nodded slightly and then marched on across the bridge until he was a few feet from the Baroness. He saluted. Take these people away, she said. Lady Seraphine von Uberwald, said Tantony woodenly. You know who I am, man. I wish to talk to you concerning certain charges made in my presence. Vimes closed his eyes. Oh, you poor dumb idiot. I didn't mean you to, actually.
You what?
Said the Baroness. It has been alleged, my lady, that a member or members of your family have been involved in a conspiracy to...
How dare you!
Screamed Seraphine, and Wolfgang leapt, and the future became a series of flickering images. In mid-air, he changed into a wolf. Vimes grabbed the bottom of Detritus's bow and forced it upwards at the same time as the troll pulled the trigger. Carrot was running before Wolfgang landed on Captain Tantony's chest. The sound of the bow echoed around the castle, above the noise of 1,000 whirring fragments scything through the sky. Carrot reached Wolfgang in a flat dive. He hit the wolf with his shoulder, and the two of them were bowled over. Then, like some moving magic lantern show, coming back up to speed, the scene exploded. Carrot got to his feet, and it must be because we're abroad, thought Vimes. He's trying to do things properly. He'd squared up to the werewolf, fists balled, a stance taken straight from Figure 1 of the noble art of fisticuffs, which looked impressive right up to the point when your opponent broke your nose with a quart mug. Carrot had a punch like an iron bar, and he landed a couple of heavy blows on Wolfgang as he got up. The werewolf seemed more puzzled than hurt. Then he changed shape, caught a fist in both hands and gripped it hard. To Vimes's horror, he stepped forward without apparent effort, forcing Carrot back. Don't try anything, Angua, said Wolf, grinning happily, or else I'll break his arm. Or perhaps I'll break his arm anyway. Yes! Vimes even heard the crack. Carrot went white. Someone holding a broken arm has all the control they need. Another idiot, thought Vimes. When they're down, you don't let them get back up. Damn the Marquis of Fantalier. Policing by consent was a good theory, but you had to get your opponent to lie still first. Ah, and he has other bones, said Wolfgang, pushing Carrot away. He glanced towards Angua. Get back! Get back, or I'll hurt him some more. No, I shall hurt him some more anyway. Then Carrot kicked him in the stomach. Wolfgang went over backwards, but turned this into a backflip and a mid-air spin. He landed lightly, leapt back at the astonished Carrot and punched him twice in the chest. Chuk chuk. The blows sounded like shovels hitting wet concrete. Wolfgang grabbed the falling man, lifted him over his head with one hand and hurled him down onto the bridge in front of Angua. Civilized man, he shouted. Here he is, sister. Vimes heard a sound down beside him. Gavin was watching intently, making urgent little noises in his throat. A tiny part of Vimes, The little rock-hard core of cynicism thought, "All right for you, then." Steam was rising off Wolfgang. He shone in the torchlight. The blonde hair across his shoulders gleamed like a slipped halo. Angua knelt down by the body, face impassive. Vimes had been expecting a scream of rage. He heard her crying. Beside Vimes, Gavin whined. Vimes stared down at the wolf. He looked at Angua trying to lift Carrot, and then he looked at Wolfgang, and then back again. "Anyone else?" said Wolfgang, dancing back and forth on the boards. "How about you, civilized?" "Sam!" hissed Sybil. "You can't!" Vimes drew his sword. Shing! It wouldn't make any difference now. Wolfgang wasn't playing now. He wasn't punching and running away. Those arms could push a fist through Vimes's ribcage and out the other side. A blur went past at shoulder height. Gavin struck Wolfgang in the throat, knocking him over. They rolled across the bridge, Wolfgang changing back to wolf shape to lock jaw against jaw. They broke, circled, and went for one another again. Dreamlike, Vimes heard a small voice say, "He wouldn't last 5 minutes back home fighting like that. The silly bugger's gonna get creamed. Fighting like that. Stuff the Marquise of Flaming Fantalier." Gaspard was sitting bolt upright, stubby tail vibrating. "The dafty! This is how you win a dogfight!" As the wolves rolled over and over, Wolfgang tearing at Gavin's belly, Gaspard arrived growling and yapping and launched himself in the general direction of the werewolf's hindquarters. There was a yip. Gaspard's growls became somewhat muffled. Wolfgang leapt vertically. Gavin sprang. The three hit the parapet of the bridge together, knocked the crumbling stones aside, hung for a moment in a snarling ball, and then dropped down into the roaring whiteness of the river. The whole of it, from the moment Tantony had crossed the bridge, had taken much less than a minute. The Baroness was staring down into the gorge, keeping his eyes on her. Vimes spoke to Detritus. "Are you sure you're werewolf-proof, Sergeant?" "Pretty much, sir. Anyway, I got the bow wound up again." "Go into the castle and fetch the resident eagle, then," said Vimes calmly. "If anyone even tries to stop you, shoot them, and shoot anyone standing near them." "No problem about that, sir." "We're not at home to Mr. Reasonable, Sergeant." "I do not hear him knocking, sir." "Go to it, then. Sergeant Angua." She did not look up. "Sergeant Angua!" Now she looked up. "How can you be so cool?" she snarled. "He's hurt." "I know. Go and talk to those watchmen hanging around on the other end of the bridge. They look scared. I don't want any accidents. We're going to need them. Shiri, cover Carrot and the lad with something. Keep them warm." I wish there was something to keep me warm, he thought. The thoughts came slowly, like drips of freezing water. He felt that ice would crackle off him if he moved, that frost would sparkle in his footsteps, that his mind was full of crisp snow. "And now, madam," he said, turning back to the Baroness, "you will give me the scone of stone." "He'll be back," hissed the Baroness. "That fall was nothing. And he'll find you." "For the last time, the stone of the dwarves. The wolves are waiting out there. The dwarves are waiting down in the city. Give me the stone, and we all might survive. This is diplomacy. Don't let me try anything else. I have only to say the word. Angua began to growl. Sybil strode towards the Baroness and grabbed her. You never answered a single letter! All those years I wrote to you! The Baroness stared at her in amazement, as people so often did when struck with Sybil's sharp non sequiturs. Sequitur, the conclusion of an inference, a consequence. Sequitur. The Baroness stared at her in amazement, as people so often did when struck with Sybil's sharp non sequiturs. If you know we've got the scone, she said to Vimes, then you know it's not the real one. And much good may it do the dwarves. Yes, you had it made in Ankh-Morpork. Made in Ankh-Morpork. They should have stamped it on the bottom, but someone killed the man who did it. That's murder. It's against the law. Vimes nodded at the Baroness. It's a thing we have. Gaspard dragged himself out of the water and stood shivering on the shingle. Every single part of him felt bruised. There was a nasty ringing noise in his ears. Blood dripped down one leg. The last few minutes had been a little hazy, but he did recall they'd involved a lot of water that had hit him like hammers. He shook himself. His coat jangled where the water was already freezing. Out of habit, he walked over to the nearest tree and, wincing, raised a leg. Excuse me. A busy, reflective silence followed. That was not a good thing you just did, said Gaspard. I'm sorry. Perhaps this is not the right moment. Not for me, no. You may have caused some physical damage here. It's hard to know what to say. Trees don't normally talk back, is my point. Gaspard sighed. So what happens now? I beg your pardon. I'm dead, right? No. No one is more surprised than me. I may say, but your time does not appear to be now. Death pulled out an hourglass, held it up against the cold stars for a moment, and stalked away along the riverbank. Excuse me, there's no chance of a lift, is there? Said Gaspard, struggling after him. None whatsoever. Only being a short dog in deep snow is not good for the old what's-names, if you get my... Death had stopped at a little bay. An indistinct shape lay in a few inches of water. Oh, said Gaspard. Death leaned down. There was a flash of blue, and then he vanished. Gaspard shivered. He paddled into the water and nudged Gavin's sodden fur with his nose. Shouldn't be like this, he whined. If you was a human, they'd put you in a big boat on the tide and set fire to it, and everyone see. Should it just be you and me down here in the cold? There was something that had to be done, too. He knew it in his bones. He crawled back to the bank and pulled himself up onto the trunk of a fallen willow. He cleared his throat. Then he howled. It started badly, hesitantly, but it picked up and got stronger, richer, and when he paused for breath, the howl went on and on, passing from throat to throat across the forest. The sound wrapped him as he slid off the log and struggled on towards higher ground. It lifted him over the deeper snow. It wound around the trees, a plating of many voices, becoming something with a life of its own. He remembered thinking, maybe it'll even get as far as Ankh-Morpork. Maybe it'll get much further than that. Vimes was impressed by the Baroness. She fought back in a corner. I know nothing about any deaths. A howl came up from the forest. How many wolves were there? You never saw them, and then when they cried out, it sounded as though there was one behind every tree. This one went on and on. It sounded like a cry thrown into a lake of air, the ripples spreading out across the mountains. Angua threw her head back and screamed. Ah! Then, breath hissing between her teeth, she advanced on the Baroness, fingers flexing. Give him the damn stone, she hissed. Will any of you face me now? Then give him the stone! What seemeth to be the trouble? Ego lurched through the stricken gates, trailed by Detritus. He caught sight of the two bodies and hurried over, like a very large spider. Fetch the stone, growled Angua, and then we will leave. I can smell it. Or do you want me to take it? Seraphine glared at her, then turned on her heel and ran back into the ruins of the castle. The other werewolves shrank back from Angua, as if her stare was a whip. If you can't help these men, said Vimes to the kneeling eagle, your future does not look good. Igor nodded. This one, he said, indicating Tantony, flesh woundeth. I can stitch him up a treat, no problem. This one, he tapped Carrot, nasty break on the arm. He glanced up. Master Wolfgang been playing again? Can you make him well? Snapped Vimes. No, it's his lucky day, said Igor. I can make him better. I've got some kidneys just in, a lovely little pair, belong to young Mr. Crapancy. Hardly touched a drop of strong liquor. Same about the avalanche. Does he need them? Said Angua. No, but you should never miss an opportunity to improve yourself, I always say. Igor grinned. It was a strange sight. The scars crawled around his face like caterpillars. Just see to the arm, said Vimes firmly. The Baroness reappeared, flanked by several werewolves. They also backed away as Angua spun around. Take it, said Seraphine. Take the wretched thing. It's a fake. No crime has been committed. I'm a policeman, said Vimes. I can always find a crime. The sleigh slid under its own weight down the track towards Bionk, the town's watchmen running alongside it and giving it the occasional push. With their captain down, they were lost and bewildered, and in no mood to take orders from Vimes. But they did what Angua commanded because Angua was of the class that traditionally gave them orders. The two casualties were bedded down on blankets. Angua, said Vimes. Yes, sir. There's wolves keeping pace with us. I can see them running between the trees. I know. Are they on our side? Let's just say they're not on anyone else's side yet, shall we? They don't like me much, but they know Gavin did. And right now that's what's important. Some of them are looking for my brother. Would he have survived that? It was a long way down. Well, it wasn't fire or silver. There's nothing but white water for miles. It probably hurt a lot, but we heal amazingly well, sir. Look, I'm sorry that... No, Mr. Vimes, you're not. You shouldn't be. Carrot just didn't understand that Carrot just didn't understand what Wolfgang is like. You can't beat something like him in a fair fight. I know his family, but personal is not the same as important. Carrot always said that. Says that, said Lady Silver sharply. Yes. Carrot opened his eyes. What happened back there? He said. Wolfgang hit you, said Angua. She wiped his brow. What with? Carrot tried to push himself upwards, winced and fell back. What have I always told you about the Marquise of Fantelier? Said Vimes. Sorry, sir. Something bright rose from the distant forests. It vanished, and then a green light expanded into existence. A moment later came the pop of the flare. The signalers have got to the tower, said Vimes. Can't this damn thing go any faster? Said Angua. I mean, we can contact Ankh-Morpork, said Vimes. After everything, he felt curiously cheered by this. It was as if a special human howl had gone up. He wasn't floundering around loose now. He was floundering on the end of a very long line that made all the difference. It was a small public room over a shop in Bionk, and since it belonged to everybody, it looked as though it didn't belong to anyone. There was dust in the corners, and the chairs that were currently arranged in a ragged circle had been chosen for their ability to be stacked neatly, rather than sat on comfortably. Lady Margolotta smiled at the assembled vampires. She liked these meetings. The rest of the group were a pretty mixed bunch, and she wondered what their motives were. But perhaps they at least shared one conviction, that what you were made as wasn't what you had to be, or what you might become. And the trick was to start small. Suck, but don't impale. Little steps. And then you found that what you really wanted was power. And there were much politer ways of getting it. And then you realized that power was a bauble. Bauble. A trinket sense. He affixed the bauble with a kiss upon her middle finger. Bauble, a sceptre of a fool. Bauble, something of trifling appeal. Bauble. Little steps, and then you found that what you really wanted was power, and there were much politer ways of getting it. And then you realized that power was a bauble. Any thug had power. The true prize was control. Lord Veterinary knew that. When heavy weights were balanced on the scales, the trick was to know where to place your thumb. And all control started with the self. She stood up. They watched her with slightly worried yet friendly faces. My name in the short form is Lady Margolotta Amaya Katarina Assumpta Krasina von Uberwald, and I am a vampire. They chorused. Hello, Lady Margolotta Amaya Katarina Assumpta Krasina von Uberwald. It has been almost 4 years now, said Lady Margolotta, and I am still taking one night at a time. One neck would always be one too many. But there are compensations.